The instruments begin tuning themselves at 3:17 a.m., their strings tightening and loosening in perfect harmony while the empty concert hall watches in silence. The security guard's flashlight trembles as melodies that haven't been heard for 18 years drift through the darkness, played by hands that no longer exist. But this story begins long before that haunting night, in the cramped rehearsal space where 5 young musicians were about to change the world or disappear trying. Marcus Chun adjusts his bass guitar strap for the 100th time today, sweat beading on his forehead despite the October chill seeping through the warehouse walls. Around him, the other members of Ethereal Void move with practiced precision, each lost in their pre-show ritual. Tonight isn't just another gig, it's the launch of their first world tour, 18 months in the making. Sound check in 10, calls Sarah Winters, their lead vocalist, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of roadies hauling equipment. At 24, she carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who spent years fighting for recognition in a male-dominated industry. Her auburn hair catches the harsh stage lights as she tests the microphone, sending feedback screaming through the venue. Marcus watches her with the same intensity he's had since they formed the band 3 years ago. Not romantic, that ship sailed and crashed spectacularly during their second album, but something deeper. Professional respect mixed with genuine concern. Sarah's been pushing herself too hard lately, staying up until dawn writing lyrics, subsisting on coffee and determination. "You good?" he asks, approaching the front of the stage. She nods, but he notices how her hands shake slightly as she grips the mic stand. "Just nerves. Big night." That's an understatement. Rolling Stone called their latest album a haunting masterpiece that redefines alternative rock. The tour sold out in 47 minutes. Industry executives who wouldn't returned their calls 2 years ago are now lined up backstage, contracts in hand. Behind them, Jake Morrison attacks his drum kit with surgical precision, each strike calculated and fierce. At 19, he's the youngest member, but arguably the most technically gifted. His blonde hair falls across his eyes as he loses himself in the rhythm, completely absorbed in the complex polyrhythms that have become their signature sound. Twin brothers Alex and Danny Reeves occupy opposite ends of the stage, their guitars creating a wall of sound that somehow feels both massive and intimate. Alex, the older by 12 minutes, handles lead guitar with an almost supernatural intuition for melody. Danny, quieter and more introspective, weaves intricate harmonies that seem to emerge from thin air. "Positions," Sarah announces, and the familiar pre-show energy crackles through the air. Marcus takes his place stage left, fingers finding the opening notes of Midnight Confession, their breakthrough single. The crowd beyond the curtain rumbles with anticipation, 3,000 voices waiting to sing along to songs they've memorized, lived with, made their own. But as the curtain begins to rise, Marcus notices something that makes his stomach clench. Sarah's microphone stand is positioned 3 inches too far stage right. It's a tiny detail, meaningless to anyone else, but Sarah is obsessive about her positioning. She's checked and rechecked that stand a dozen times today. She wouldn't have moved it. The curtain reaches its apex, revealing the sea of eager faces, but Sarah hesitates for a split second, long enough for Marcus to catch the flicker of confusion in her eyes as she reaches for the mic. Her fingers close around empty air before she adjusts, covers smoothly, launches into the opening verse. The crowd erupts, and for the next 90 minutes, Ethereal Void delivers the performance of their lives. Sarah's voice soars over the instrumental foundation the others provide, each song building toward the next with mathematical precision. They've rehearsed this setlist until it's muscle memory, every transition seamless, every solo note perfect. But Marcus can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. During Fractal Hearts, their most complex composition, he notices Danny miss a chord change he's never missed before. Alex covers immediately, so smoothly that the audience doesn't notice, but Marcus does. Danny's face is pale, his usual focused expression replaced by something that looks almost like fear. The final song, Echoes of Tomorrow, brings the house down. Sarah holds the last note for 12 seconds, her voice pure and unwavering, before the lights cut to black and the crowd explodes into applause. They bow, wave, disappear backstage as the audience demands an encore that won't come. They've learned to leave people wanting more. Backstage, the energy should be electric. Instead, an odd silence falls over the group as they towel off sweat and pack their instruments. The usual post-show high is replaced by something Marcus can't identify. "Great show," Alex says, but his voice lacks conviction. Sarah nods absently, staring at her hands. Did anyone else feel off out there? Jake stops mid-motion, a cymbal halfway into its case. "Yeah, like we were playing someone else's songs." The confession hangs in the air, validating what Marcus has been feeling all evening. Something fundamental has shifted, though none of them can articulate what. Their manager, Rita Castellanos, bursts through the dressing room door, her phone pressed to her ear and her usual manic energy cranked to 11. "Incredible, absolutely incredible," she gushes, ending her call. Rolling Stone wants an exclusive interview, and there's talk of moving up the European dates. She stops mid-sentence, finally registering the mood in the room. "What's wrong?" "You just played the show of your lives." Sarah looks up, meeting Rita's eyes with an expression that's equal parts exhaustion and something darker. "We need to talk, all of us, about what happens next." Rita's smile falters. In 3 years of managing Ethereal Void, she's never seen them this serious after a triumphant show. "Okay, but can it wait until tomorrow?" The label executives are. "Now," Marcus says firmly, surprising himself with his own intensity. As Rita reluctantly closes the door and the 5 band members settle into the cramped space, Marcus realizes they're about to have a conversation that will change everything. What he doesn't know is that by morning, none of them will be there to remember it. Outside, the last of the crowd filters into the October night, chattering excitedly about the performance they've just witnessed. The venue staff begins the familiar ritual of breakdown and cleanup, unaware that they're erasing the final traces of Ethereal Void's last performance. By dawn, the band will have vanished completely, leaving behind only their instruments and a mystery that will haunt the music world for 18 years, until the night those same instruments begin playing themselves, calling out across the darkness for the musicians who will never return to claim them. The dressing room feels smaller with all 6 of them crammed inside, the walls seeming to press inward as an uncomfortable silence stretches between the band members. Rita perches on the edge of a folding chair, her phone buzzing incessantly, with calls she's ignoring for the first time in her career. Sarah breaks the quiet first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been having the dreams again." Marcus feels his chest tighten. They've all heard about Sarah's dreams, fragments of melodies that come to her in sleep, songs that feel ancient and unfamiliar despite emerging from her own subconscious. She's written their 3 biggest hits from these nocturnal visions. But lately, she's described them differently, darker, more insistent. "What kind of dreams?" Jake asks, though from his expression, Marcus suspects he already knows. "The same ones, but stronger now." Sarah runs her hands through her hair, a nervous habit she's had since childhood. "I'm standing in a concert hall, but it's empty except for our instruments on stage. They're playing without us, and the music ... She pauses, searching for words. "It's not ours, but somehow it is. Like hearing your voice played backwards." Danny Reeves speaks up from his corner, his voice unusually strained. "I've been having them too. The empty hall, the instruments. But in mine, there are people in the audience. They're completely still, and their eyes reflect the stage lights like mirrors." Alex nods slowly. "Mine are similar, but the hall keeps changing. Sometimes it's huge, like Madison Square Garden. Sometimes it's tiny, like where we started. But the instruments are always the same hours, but wrong somehow. Marcus exchanges glances with Jake, seeing his own growing unease reflected in the drummer's face. "This is going to sound crazy," Marcus says, "but I think something's been calling to us. Not the dreams, something else. Something that wants us to ... I don't know. Go somewhere." Rita's phone stops buzzing, and the sudden silence is more unsettling than the noise. "Guys, you're freaking me out. You just had the performance of your lives, and now you're talking about shared nightmares and mystical callings. Maybe you need some time off after the tour." "No," Sarah interrupts, her voice sharp. "You don't understand. It's not just dreams anymore. Today, during sound check, I heard harmonies that we've never written. Clear as day, like someone was singing them directly into my ear." Jake nods vigorously. "The drums, too. I kept wanting to play rhythms that don't exist in our catalog. My hands were moving toward beats I've never learned." "The mic stand," Marcus says suddenly, remembering. "Your positioning was off tonight. You'd never make that mistake." Sarah's face pales. "I didn't move it. When I reached for it, it felt like reaching for something that belonged to someone else. Like my body knew where it should be, but my mind expected it somewhere different." The temperature in the room seems to drop several degrees. Rita pulls her jacket tighter around her shoulders, but the others don't seem to notice the cold. They're too absorbed in the growing realization that their shared experiences aren't coincidence. "There's something else," Alex says quietly. "Danny and I have been hearing things in the apartment late at night. Guitar melodies coming from the music room, but when we go to check, our instruments are exactly where we left them. Tuned, but not played." Danny's hands shake as he reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this down 3 nights ago. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. with a complete song in my head, lyrics, melody, harmonies, everything. But it's not our style. It's not anyone's style." He unfolds the paper, revealing lines of music notation in his precise handwriting, along with lyrics scrawled in the margins. Sarah leans forward to read, and her face goes white. "The stage remembers what the players forget," she reads aloud. 5 voices calling through the endless night, waiting for the time when flesh rejoins the fight. She looks up, meeting each of their eyes in turn. I've never heard these words before, but I know exactly how they should sound. Marcus feels something cold crawl up his spine. "Show me the notation." Danny hands over the paper, and Marcus studies the musical arrangement. It's complex, intricate, definitely their skill level, but it's written for 6 instruments, not 5. There's a part for an instrument he can't identify, something that would create harmonies impossible with their current setup. "Rita," he says, not looking up from the paper, "what do you know about the venue's history?" Their manager shifts uncomfortably. "It's old. Built in the 1920s, I think. Used to be a grand theater before it became a concert hall. Why? Any unusual incidents? Disappearances? Anything like that?" Rita's laugh sounds forced. "Marcus, you're starting to scare me. This is just pre-tour jitters. Shared anxiety manifesting." Rita." Sarah's voice cuts through the rationalization like a blade. "Answer the question." A long pause stretches between them before Rita finally speaks. "There were rumors. Probably just urban legends. In 1978, a folk trio called 3 Moons was supposed to perform here. They were found in their dressing room the next morning, catatonic. No memory of the previous night, no ability to speak or recognize their own instruments. They were institutionalized within a week. The room falls silent except for the distant sound of venue staff cleaning up outside their door." "That's not all," Rita continues reluctantly. "In 1991, a jazz quartet called Midnight Train disappeared entirely after their show here. Their instruments were found on stage, perfectly arranged, but the musicians were never seen again. Police investigated for months but found nothing. Jake's drumsticks, which he's been nervously twirling, clattered to the floor. How many incidents? 7 confirmed disappearances or breakdowns over the past 40 years. All musicians. All. After performing on this specific stage. Rita's voice grows smaller with each word. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be nervous, and honestly, I thought it was just coincidence. Venues this old collect stories. Sarah stands abruptly, pacing the small space like a caged animal. So what you're telling us is that we just performed on a stage that has a history of destroying musical careers, and we've all been having supernatural experiences for weeks leading up to it? Sarah, please, no. Her voice carries the authority that makes her such a compelling performer. Something is happening to us. Something connected to this place, to music itself. We can either acknowledge it and figure out what to do, or we can pretend everything's normal and see what happens. Marcus looks around the room at his bandmates, people he shared 3 years of intense creative collaboration with, who feel more like family than friends. The rational part of his mind insists this is elaborate group hysteria, stress-induced delusions brought on by the pressure of their first major tour. But the bass lines he's been hearing in his sleep, the way his fingers keep moving toward frets that would produce notes he's never learned, the growing certainty that something vast and patient has been watching them, all of it feels more real than anything he's experienced in months. What if we left? He asks quietly, right now. Cancel the tour, get out of the city, go somewhere completely different. The contracts alone would destroy us, Rita says immediately. We'd owe hundreds of thousands in penalties. Your careers would be over. Danny speaks up from his corner, his voice hollow. What if our careers are over anyway? What if staying means ending up like those other musicians? The question hangs in the air, unanswerable and terrifying. Outside their door, the venue grows quieter as the cleanup crew finishes their work. Soon, they'll be asked to leave, forced to make a decision about what comes next. Sarah stops pacing and turns to face them all. I think we need to go back out there. On stage, together, see if we can figure out what's really happening. That's insane, Rita protests. The venue's closing. Security will. I have keys, Jake says quietly. My cousin works security here. He gave me a spare set in case we needed to retrieve equipment after hours. The admission settles over them like a weight. Somehow, without planning it, they've reached the moment of decision. They can walk away, pretend this was just an intense conversation brought on by performance adrenaline, and hope the strange experiences fade with time. Or they can return to the stage that has claimed 7 musical acts over 4 decades and discover what's been calling to them through their dreams. The venue at midnight feels like a completely different place. Emergency lighting casts long shadows across empty corridors, and their footsteps echo with an otherworldly resonance that makes Marcus's skin crawl. Jake leads them through a service entrance, his security keys jingling softly in the darkness. We should stick together, Sarah whispers, though she's not sure why she's whispering. The building feels like it's listening. They move as a group. Through the backstage area, past darkened dressing rooms and equipment storage. Rita trails behind, muttering about insurance liability and trespassing charges, but she doesn't leave. Whatever's happening has hooked her too, despite her protests. The stage door opens with a soft creak, revealing the concert hall in its after-hours state. House lights dim to almost nothing, rows of empty seats stretching into darkness. But their instruments remain exactly where they left them, illuminated by a single work light that someone forgot to turn off. This feels wrong, Danny says, his voice barely audible. Alex nods, stepping closer to his brother. Like we're intruding somewhere we don't belong. But Sarah is already walking toward the stage, drawn by something she can't name. Her footsteps sound different on the wooden floor, not quite echoes, but not quite solid either. As if the stage itself is responding to her presence. "Sarah, wait," Marcus calls, but she's already climbing the steps. She approaches her microphone stand, the same one that felt foreign just hours ago. Now it feels familiar again, positioned exactly where her muscle memory expects it. She reaches out, her fingers closing around the cool metal, and immediately gasps. The others rush toward the stage as Sarah staggers backward, her face pale with shock. "What happened?" Marcus demands, reaching her side. "I saw them," she breathes. "The other musicians, they're still here." Jake's hands tremble as he approaches his drum kit. "What do you mean, still here?" "Not physically, but their music is trapped in these instruments. I could hear it when I touched the mic. 7 different voices, 7 different styles, all layered together. They're trying to tell us something." Rita remains near the stage door, clearly wanting to flee but unable to look away. "This is insane. We should call someone." "The police or—" "No," Alex says firmly, surprising everyone with his intensity. "We need to understand what's happening first." He moves to his guitar, lifts it carefully from its stand. The moment his fingers touch the strings, his eyes widen. "There's a song here. Something that wants to be played. But it's not complete. Like it's missing pieces." Danny joins his brother, picking up his own instrument. "I feel it too. But it's not just missing pieces, it's missing us. Our specific sound signature." Marcus approaches his bass with growing dread and fascination. When he lifts the instrument, the sensation is immediate and overwhelming. Musical. Knowledge floods through him, techniques he's never learned. Harmonic progressions that shouldn't work, but somehow do. Rhythms that exist in dimensions he didn't know music could occupy. "It's been collecting us," he realizes aloud. "Every musician who's performed here, every unique sound they brought. It's been gathering musical DNA, but it needs willing participants to complete whatever it's trying to create." Jake sits behind. His drums, his hands hovering over the skins without making contact. "What happens if we give it what it wants?" "We become part of it," Sarah says, her voice distant. She's still gripping the microphone, her eyes closed as if listening to something only she can hear. "We join the others, and our music becomes part of something larger. Something that's been growing for decades." "And if we don't?" Danny asks. Sarah opens her eyes, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "Then it takes us anyway, but violently. Like what happened to the folk trio minds, shattered by forced integration. The others, the ones who disappeared, they fought it. They were consumed completely." Rita finally approaches the stage, her business instincts warring with her terror. "So what are you saying? That we have to choose between being absorbed into some musical collective or having our minds destroyed?" "I'm saying," Sarah replies, her voice growing stronger, "that we have a third option. We give it what it wants, but on our terms. We maintain our individual identities while contributing to the larger composition." Marcus feels the bass responding to his proximity, strings vibrating slightly even though he hasn't touched them. "How do we know that's possible?" "Because," Alex says, positioning his fingers on his fretboard, "I can feel the others trying to show us. They're not gone, they're transformed. Still themselves, but part of something bigger. They want us to understand that it doesn't have to be destruction." The work light overhead flickers, casting shifting shadows across the stage. In those brief moments of altered illumination, Marcus catches glimpses of translucent figures standing behind each of their positions, previous musicians, guides showing them how to approach the transition safely. "We have to do it together," Sarah says, her voice now carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "All at once, as a unified group. If even one of us hesitates or fights the process, we all get torn apart." Rita steps onto the stage, her face set with resignation and determination. "What about me? I'm not a musician." You're part of our creative process, Jake says, settling fully behind his drums. Our music doesn't exist without your guidance and support. If this thing has been collecting musical collaborations, then you're as essential as any of us. The realization settles over them that they've moved beyond the point of retreat. The venue's supernatural presence has been building toward this moment for 40 years, gathering musical fragments and waiting for the right combination of artists to complete its composition. Marcus looks around at his bandmates, people he's trusted with his creative soul for 3 years, who've become his chosen family through shared artistic struggle. Are we really doing this? We're already doing it, Sarah replies, her voice harmonizing with something inaudible. We were chosen the moment we stepped onto the stage the first time. Every rehearsal, every performance, every song we've written together has been preparing us for this. Alex and Danny position themselves at their guitars, their movements synchronized despite their fear. Jake raises his drumsticks, holding them steady above the kit. Rita moves to stand behind Sarah's position, her hand resting on the microphone stand's base. On 3? Marcus asks, his fingers finding the opening notes of the mysterious song Danny transcribed, the composition that called to them through dreams and demanded completion. On 3, Sarah agrees. 1, Alex counts, his guitar humming with anticipation. 2, Danny adds, harmonies already beginning to emerge from his instrument. Rita closes her eyes, feeling the vibrations of impending music travel through the stage floor and into her bones. 3, Sarah whispers, and they begin to play. The moment their instruments produce the first unified note, the concert hall transforms. The emergency lighting blazes to full intensity, revealing that every seat in the house is occupied by translucent figures, previous musicians, their audiences, everyone who has ever been touched by the venue's supernatural influence. But instead of terror, Marcus feels an overwhelming sense of completion. The music flowing through him is their music, unmistakably Ethereal Void's signature sound, but elevated and expanded in ways that seem to bend the laws of physics. The song builds, incorporating elements from every musical style the venue has. Collected over the decades, folk harmonies, jazz improvisation, classical structure, rock energy, all woven together by the band's unique creative voice. And as the music reaches its crescendo, Marcus realizes with crystal clarity that they're not being absorbed or destroyed. They're being translated, converted from physical musicians into something far more powerful and eternal. The last thing he sees before the transformation completes is Sarah's face, radiant with joy as her voice carries them all into whatever lies beyond the boundary between the living and the purely musical. Detective Lisa Wong stands in the empty concert hall, her breath visible in the unseasonably cold air as she studies the crime scene that isn't quite a crime scene. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. of disturbance at the Meridian Theater. Possible break-in, instruments playing by themselves. Standard protocol would be to dismiss it as a prank call, but this is the third report in 2 months, and each one mentions the same impossible detail. No signs of forced entry, Officer Martinez reports, his voice echoing in the vast space. Doors were locked, security system never triggered. But the night janitor swears he heard a full band playing when he arrived for his shift. Lisa nods, making notes on her tablet while her eyes scan the stage. 5 instruments sit in perfect formation under the work lights, bass guitar, drum kit, 2 electric guitars, and a vintage microphone on its stand. Exactly the same setup that's been photographed here dozens of times over the past 18 years, ever since Ethereal Void vanished without explanation. Any witnesses besides the janitor? 3 people called it in from the street. All described hearing the same thing, a complete rock performance, professionally mixed, coming from inside a locked building. Martinez pauses, consulting his notes. One caller specifically mentioned recognizing songs from Ethereal Void's catalog. Lisa has heard this before. Every few months, someone reports musical activity at the Meridian Theater. The venue has been closed since the disappearance, tied up in legal proceedings and insurance claims that have dragged on for nearly 2 decades. Officially, it's condemned. Unofficially, it's become Portland's most persistent urban legend. "Let's check the instruments," she says, approaching the stage. The setup is identical to crime scene photos from 18 years ago, not just similar, but precisely matching down to the angle of the microphone stand and the position of each drum. Lisa has studied those photos countless times during her obsession with the ethereal void case, one of the city's most enduring mysteries. As she climbs the stage steps, her phone buzzes with a text from her partner. Another cold case review meeting, moved to 2 p.m. Chief wants updates on all unsolved disappearances. Perfect timing. Lisa has been pushing for months to reopen the ethereal void investigation, convinced that modern forensic techniques might reveal clues the original investigators missed. 5 people don't simply vanish from a locked building without leaving traces. She approaches the bass guitar first, noting how perfectly maintained it appears, despite sitting in an abandoned building for nearly 2 decades. No dust, no corrosion. Strings still taut and gleaming. She pulls out her phone to take photos, but as the camera flash illuminates the instrument, something makes her pause. The bass is tuned. Recently, Lisa has enough musical background to recognize that guitar strings lose tension over time, especially in fluctuating temperatures. These strings shouldn't just be intact, they should be completely slack. Instead, they appear to be at perfect pitch. She moves to the drum kit, running her fingers along the rim of the snare. Again, the equipment appears pristine, as if it was set up yesterday rather than abandoned 18 years ago. The drumheads show no signs of age or environmental damage. Martinez, when was the last time anyone was authorized to enter this building? According to the property management company, not since the insurance investigators finished their work in 2006. Building's been sealed ever since. Lisa photographs everything methodically, but each image raises more questions. The microphone stand shows no signs of corrosion. The guitar cables are neatly coiled, not tangled or deteriorated. Even the stage floor beneath the instruments is remarkably clean, as if someone has been maintaining this exact setup for 18 years. Her radio crackles to life. "Detective Wong, we've got another caller on the line." Says she has information about the ethereal void case. Lisa exchanges glances with Martinez. "Put her through." The voice that comes through her radio is elderly, slightly breathless with excitement. "Detective, my name is Dorothy Chen. I've been following the reports about music at the theater, and I think you need to know my grandson Marcus was the bass player for that band." Lisa's pulse quickens. Marcus Chun's family has been notoriously private since the disappearance, refusing most media interviews and cooperating minimally with police investigations. "Mrs. Chen, I'd like to speak with you in person." "Would that be possible?" "I'm already here, dear." Parking lot behind the theater. "I've been coming here every few months since they disappeared, hoping for some sign of what happened to my boy." Through the stage door windows, Lisa can see an elderly Asian woman standing beside a blue sedan, her silver hair catching the early morning light. Even from a distance, there's something determined about her posture that suggests she won't be easily dismissed. Martinez finished documenting the scene. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. Lisa makes her way through the theater's backstage corridors, noting how her footsteps seem to echo with unusual resonance. The building has an oppressive quality that goes beyond typical abandoned structure creepiness, as if the walls themselves are holding secrets. Dorothy Chun is exactly what Lisa expected, sharp-eyed, well-dressed despite the early hour, and clearly someone who spent years thinking about her grandson's disappearance. She extends a firm handshake and gets directly to business. "You're reopening the case," she states rather than asks. "I'm trying to." Your grandson's disappearance, along with his bandmates, represents one of our department's most challenging unsolved cases. Dorothy nods approvingly. Good. The original investigators missed crucial details because they were focused on conventional explanations. They treated it like a standard missing persons case instead of recognizing the supernatural elements. Lisa keeps her expression neutral, though internally she's intrigued. Most family members of missing persons avoid supernatural explanations, preferring to hope for rational solutions. What supernatural elements? The dreams, for starters. Marcus had been having vivid nightmares for weeks before the disappearance. He described them to me: empty concert halls, instruments playing themselves, voices calling to him through music. Dorothy pulls a worn notebook from her purse. I wrote down everything he told me. I've been documenting every strange report about this theater for 18 years. She opens the notebook, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting interspersed with newspaper clippings, witness statements, and photographs. This building has been actively haunted since 2005, not just random supernatural activity, specifically musical manifestations. Lisa examines the documentation, impressed by its thoroughness. Dorothy has compiled reports from security guards, neighbors, urban explorers, and maintenance workers, all describing similar phenomena. Instruments playing in empty buildings, familiar songs echoing from locked spaces, figures seen on stage during the middle of the night. Mrs. Chun, why didn't you share this with the original investigators? I tried. They weren't receptive to non-conventional theories. Dorothy's voice carries years of frustration. They were looking for evidence of kidnapping, murder, or voluntary disappearance. They couldn't accept that 5 people might have encountered something beyond normal human experience. A gust of wind rattles through the theater district, and Lisa notices that the sounds seem to resonate strangely around the Meridian building. Not quite echoes, but as if the structure itself is responding to acoustic stimuli. What do you think happened to them? Dorothy closes her notebook, meeting Lisa's eyes with the steady gaze of someone who's had 18 years to formulate theories. I think they became part of the building's history. Not dead, exactly, but transformed into something that exists between the physical and musical worlds. It's the kind of statement that would normally end Lisa's interest in a witness, but Dorothy's documentation is too thorough, her observations too consistent with the evidence Lisa has been gathering. And there's something about the theater itself that defies rational explanation. Would you be willing to come inside with me? Show me what you've observed? Dorothy's face lights up with the first genuine smile Lisa has seen from her. Detective, I've been waiting 18 years for someone to ask me that question. As they walk toward the theater's stage entrance, Lisa's radio crackles again. Martinez's voice comes through, tense with confusion. Detective, you need to see this. The instruments, they've moved. Lisa and Dorothy rush through the theater's corridors, their footsteps echoing with an urgency that seems to make the building itself hold its breath. When they burst through the stage door, Martinez is standing frozen in the center of the performance area, his face pale with disbelief. They're exactly where they were, he says, his voice strained, but different. Like someone adjusted them while I was taking photos. Lisa approaches the instrument setup, immediately noticing what Martinez means. The positions are identical to her initial observations, but subtle details have changed. The bass guitar's strap is now draped differently across the body. One of the electric guitars has a capo on the 3rd fret that wasn't there before. The drumsticks, which had been resting on the snare drum, are now positioned crossed over the hi-hat. How long were you alone with them? Lisa asks, maybe 10 minutes. I was photographing the drum kit when I heard ... movement. Not footsteps, exactly. More like someone adjusting equipment very carefully. When I looked up, everything was different. Dorothy approaches the microphone stand, her expression intense with recognition. Marcus told me about this. He said their instruments would sometimes change configuration between rehearsals, as if someone else had been playing them. The band thought it was practical jokes at first. Lisa circles the drum kit, noting that the cymbals are now angled differently, positioned for a left-handed drummer, rather than the right-handed setup documented in all previous crime scene photos. Jake Morrison, Ethereal Void's drummer, was right-handed. Mrs. Chun, do you know if any of the band members were left-handed? None of them. But Marcus mentioned that during their final weeks, Jake complained about feeling compelled to play with his left hand. Said it felt more natural, even though he'd been right-handed his entire life. Martinez pulls out his tablet, scrolling through the photos he took 20 minutes earlier. Look at this, he says, showing Lisa an image of the guitar setup. Both guitars had their volume knobs turned to 7. Now they're at different settings. Lisa examines the instruments, noting that the volume and tone controls have indeed been adjusted. More significantly, both guitars are now plugged into amplifiers that weren't connected before, amplifiers that shouldn't have power in a building that's been without electricity for over a decade. Martinez, check the power situation. These amps are getting electricity from somewhere. While Martinez investigates the electrical setup, Lisa turns her attention to Dorothy's notebook. What else did Marcus tell you about the weeks before? The disappearance? He said they were being taught. Not by anyone visible, but through their instruments. Melodies would come to them that they'd never heard before, but their hands knew exactly how to play them. Sarah, the vocalist, started singing harmonies to songs that didn't exist. Dorothy flips through her notes, finding a specific entry. 3 days before they vanished, Marcus called me at 2 a.m. He was terrified. Said he'd been practicing bass lines in his sleep, and when he woke up, his fingers were positioned on his bass exactly where they'd been in the dream. The bass was across the room from his bed. Lisa feels a chill that has nothing to do with the theater's temperature. Did he mention anything about the venue specifically, about this building? He said it felt like coming home. Not comfortable, familiar in a way that frightened him. Like the building recognized them before they recognized it. Martinez calls from behind the stage setup, his voice echoing strangely in the acoustic space. Detective, you need to see this power situation. Lisa and Dorothy make their way to the back of the stage, where Martinez has located the electrical panel. Every circuit breaker is in the off position, exactly as they should be in an abandoned building. But cables from the guitar amplifiers disappear into the floor through gaps that shouldn't exist, connecting to some power source that bypasses the building's official electrical system. This is impossible, Martinez mutters. There's no way. These instruments should be getting power. Dorothy examines the cable arrangement with the intense focus of someone who's been thinking about this mystery for 18 years. Unless the power source isn't electrical. Marcus mentioned that their instruments started responding to emotional energy rather than traditional amplification. Strong feelings would make the guitars louder, more resonant. To test the theory, Lisa approaches the bass guitar and carefully touches one of the strings. The note that emerges is far louder and more sustained than should be possible from an unplugged electric instrument. The sound fills the entire concert hall, reverberating with impossible richness. Jesus, Martinez breathes. How is that? His question is cut off as all 5 instruments suddenly produce a unified chord, despite no one touching them. The sound is massive, professional quality, mixed and balanced as if passing through a complete sound system. But there are no speakers visible, no mixing board, no obvious source for the amplification. Dorothy grips Lisa's arm, her eyes bright with excitement and terror. They're trying to communicate. This is what I've been documenting for 18 years' attempts at contact. The chord sustains for nearly 30 seconds before fading to silence. In the aftermath, Lisa notices that the acoustic properties of the hall have changed. Their voices now carry with crystalline clarity, And even subtle sounds, the rustle of Dorothy's notebook pages, Martinez's nervous breathing resonate with unusual depth. Mrs. Chun, in your documentation, have you identified any patterns? Specific times, conditions, or triggers for these manifestations? Dorothy nods, flipping to a section of her notebook marked with colored tabs. 3 main patterns. First, they're most active between 3 and 4 a.m., the time when reality is thinnest, according to several supernatural researchers I've consulted. Second, they respond to emotional connection. People who genuinely cared about the band or who understand musical theory seem to trigger stronger responses. And the third pattern? They're trying to tell us something about their final night. Every manifestation includes elements from their last performance-specific songs, instrumental arrangements, even audience reactions that witnesses describe from that show. Lisa studies the stage setup with new eyes, recognizing that what she initially interpreted as evidence preservation might actually be active communication. What if they're not gone? What if they're trapped here, trying to show us what happened? The question hangs in the air for several seconds before being answered by an unexpected source. Sarah Winter's voice, unmistakable despite 18 years of absence, emerges from the microphone with startling clarity. Lisa, you have to understand the choice we made. Martinez stumbles backward, nearly falling off the stage. Dorothy gasps, but maintains her composure, as if she's been expecting this moment for years. Lisa approaches the microphone stand, her detective training warring with the impossibility of what's happening. Sarah Winters, we're still here, all of us. But we exist differently now, as part of the music itself. We can only communicate when someone understands what we became. The voice is definitely Sarah's, but there's a harmonic quality to it, as if multiple vocal tracks are layered together. Lisa notices that Dorothy is quietly weeping. 18 years of wondering finally answered. What happened that night? Why did you disappear? We didn't disappear. We transformed. The building had been collecting musical souls for decades, but it needed willing participants to complete its composition. We chose to join rather than be consumed. Marcus's voice joined Sarah's, speaking through the bass guitar's electromagnetic pickups. The others, the musicians who vanished before us, they fought the process. It destroyed their minds, their identities. We found a way to maintain ourselves while becoming part of something larger. Lisa's radio crackles, startling her back to practical concerns. The voice of her sergeant comes through. Detective Wong. What's your status? We've got reports of loud music coming from your location. She looks around the stage, realizing that their conversation with the transformed band members is being heard throughout the neighborhood. The instruments are amplifying their voices across a much wider area than the concert hall. Sarah, Marcus, we need to understand this quietly. Can you control the volume? We're still learning. Jake's voice emerges from the drum kit, somehow, conveying both apology and excitement. 18 years of existence as pure musical energy, and we're still figuring out how to interact with the physical world. Dorothy steps forward, her voice steady despite her tears. Marcus, it's Grandma. I've been waiting so long to know you were all right. We're more than all right, Grandma. We're part of something beautiful and eternal. But we need help there. Are others coming, and they don't understand what we've become. They want to separate us, return us to physical form, and that would destroy everything we've built here. Lisa's detective instincts sharpen. What others? Who's coming? The instruments fall silent for a moment, and when the voices return, they carry an urgency that makes Lisa's pulse quicken. Rita, all 5 voices say in unison, our manager. She never stopped looking for us, and she's very close to finding a way to bring us back. But forced return would shatter us across dimensions. We need someone who understands to protect what we've become. Across the city, Rita Castellanos sits surrounded by 18 years of accumulated research, Her downtown apartment transformed into a shrine to ethereal void's disappearance. File cabinets line every wall, filled with witness statements, paranormal investigations, occult research, and correspondence with everyone from quantum physicists to shamanic healers. At 62, she spent more money and time searching for her vanished clients than she earned managing them during their brief career. The breakthrough came 3 weeks ago, buried in a manuscript she purchased from the estate of Dr. Helena Voss, a researcher who spent decades studying musical dimensional phenomena. The document describes a process called harmonic retrieval, a method for forcing displaced souls back into physical form using specific acoustic frequencies combined with electromagnetic disruption. Rita has always suspected that ethereal void didn't simply disappear, they were transformed, absorbed into some supernatural process connected to the Meridian Theater. Every psychic, medium, and paranormal investigator she's consulted has confirmed the same basic theory. The band exists in a state between physical reality and pure energy, accessible but not truly gone. She stands before a wall covered with mathematical equations, sound wave diagrams, and electrical schematics. Dr. Voss's research suggests that beings trapped in musical limbo can be recalled using combination of their original instruments, specific frequency modulations, and a powerful electromagnetic pulse timed to disrupt their energy-based existence. The equipment required is extensive and expensive, but Rita liquidated her retirement accounts, sold her house, and cashed in every favor accumulated during 30 years in the music industry. The electromagnetic pulse generator alone cost $40,000 on the black market, purchased from a defense contractor who didn't ask questions about its intended use. Her phone buzzes with a text from Jake Morrison's cousin, the same security guard who provided Ethereal Void with keys to the theater 18 years ago. Cops at the venue this morning. Someone reported music. Thought you should know. Rita's pulse quickens. Recent supernatural activity suggests the band is becoming more accessible, more able to interact with the physical world. According to Dr. Voss's research, this represents the optimal window for harmonic retrieval, the moment when energy-based beings are most vulnerable to forced reintegration. She checks her equipment one final time. The portable sound system is loaded with high-quality recordings of every Ethereal Void song, ready to play the specific frequencies that will call their energy signatures back to corporeal form. The electromagnetic pulse generator is charged and calibrated, its settings based on calculations derived from the theater's acoustic properties and the band's known musical signatures. The plan is elegant in its simplicity. Overwhelm their energy-based existence with familiar musical patterns, while simultaneously disrupting their supernatural cohesion with electromagnetic interference. They'll be forced back into physical form, probably unconscious and disoriented, but alive and retrievable. Rita loads her equipment into a rented van, her hands shaking with 18 years of accumulated desperation. She's imagined this moment countless times, the reunion, the explanations, the vindication of her belief that they could be saved. The music industry wrote off Ethereal Void as another unsolved mystery, but she never stopped believing they were recoverable. The drive to the theater takes 20 minutes through Portland's early morning traffic. Rita parks in the same loading dock where the band's equipment truck sat 18 years ago, the circular symmetry feeling appropriately meaningful. Through the van's windshield, she can see police vehicles still present, which complicates her timeline but doesn't change her resolve. She waits until the official investigation concludes, watching as the detective and an elderly woman leave the building. The uniformed officer remains for another hour, presumably securing the scene, before finally departing around noon. Rita gives the area another 30 minutes to ensure privacy, then begins unloading her equipment. The theater's stage door, which should be locked, opens easily to her touch, as if the building itself is welcoming her return. The interior feels different from her last visit 6 months ago, charged with an energy that makes her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. Something has definitely changed recently. Rita sets up her equipment with practiced efficiency, positioning speakers throughout the concert hall and running cables back to the central control station she establishes in the orchestra pit. The electromagnetic pulse generator requires careful placement. Dr. Voss's research specifies that it must be positioned at the exact center of the supernatural manifestation, which Rita calculates as dead center stage. As she works, she becomes aware of subtle sounds throughout the building. Not quite music, but rhythmic vibrations that seem to emerge from the walls themselves. The theater is responding to her presence, possibly alerting its supernatural inhabitants to the threat she represents. "I know you're here," she calls out while connecting the final cables. "I know you can hear me. I've spent 18 years learning how to bring you home." The vibrations intensify, and Rita notices that her equipment is responding strangely to the environment. The sound system's volume levels fluctuate without input, and the electromagnetic generator's readings spike beyond normal parameters. The building's supernatural energy is interfering with her technology, but Dr. Voss's research predicted this phenomenon. She activates the first phase of the retrieval process: acoustic saturation. Ethereal Void's music floods the concert hall at maximum volume, every song they ever recorded playing simultaneously through different speaker arrays. The cacophony should be unbearable, but somehow the overlapping melodies create complex harmonies. Instead of noise, the theater responds immediately. Lights flicker throughout the building, and Rita feels the floor vibrating beneath her feet as if massive subwoofers are buried in the foundation. The supernatural presence is fighting her. Intervention, but the acoustic assault is having its intended effect. Through the chaos, she hears voices: Sarah, Marcus, Jake, Alex, and Danny calling out in confusion and growing alarm. They're trying to communicate with her, but the overlapping music makes conversation impossible. This is exactly what Dr. Voss's research predicted. The energy-based beings would lose coherence when overwhelmed by their own musical signatures. Rita activates the second phase: electromagnetic disruption. The pulse generator sends waves of directed energy across the stage, designed to interfere with the supernatural cohesion that maintains the band's non-physical existence. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The air above the stage begins to shimmer like heat distortion, and Rita catches glimpses of translucent figures struggling to maintain form. She can see Sarah reaching toward the microphone, Marcus clutching his bass, all 5 band members fighting to remain connected to their instruments while the electromagnetic bombardment tears at their energy-based existence. "I'm sorry," Rita shouts over the acoustic chaos. "I know this hurts, but it's the only way to bring you back." The figures become more solid as the electromagnetic pulses intensify, but their expressions are filled with terror rather than gratitude. They're not experiencing salvation. They're being tortured back into physical form against their will. Sarah's voice cuts through the musical cacophony, harmonically amplified by her connection to the theater's supernatural acoustics. "Rita, stop! You don't understand what you're doing." But Rita can't stop now. 18 years of planning, her entire life savings, every relationship sacrificed to this obsession. She's too close to success to be deterred by the band's apparent resistance. Dr. Voss's research warned that energy-based beings often fight reintegration, confused by their non-physical existence into believing they prefer their transformed state. She pushes the electromagnetic generator to maximum power, sending waves of disruptive energy that make the air itself seem to crack and splinter. The band members become increasingly solid, their translucent forms gaining opacity and definition. But something is wrong. They're not coalescing into their original bodies, but fracturing into incomplete fragments. Marcus materializes first, but only from the waist up, his lower body remaining translucent and unstable. Jake appears as arms and torso, his legs completely absent. Sarah's voice maintains its power, but her physical form flickers between solid and ethereal, unable to stabilize. "Rita!" Alex's voice carries desperate urgency. "You're killing us. We chose this transformation. Forcing us back will destroy everything we've become." But Rita is committed beyond the point of rational decision-making. She activates the final phase of Dr. Voss's process, temporal anchor, a device designed to lock the retrieved beings into a specific moment in time, preventing them from dispersing back into energy form. The effect is catastrophic. Instead of stabilizing the band members' physical forms, the temporal anchor creates a feedback loop that begins tearing apart the theater's supernatural infrastructure. 18 years of accumulated musical energy, dozens of trapped souls, decades of harmonic accumulation, all of it begins to unravel at once. The building itself starts to shake as supernatural forces that have been carefully balanced for nearly a century spiral into chaos. Rita realizes with growing horror that she hasn't just threatened ethereal void, she's triggered a supernatural cascade that could destroy everyone and everything connected to the theater's musical history. Detective Lisa Wong is 3 blocks away when the first shockwave hits. The windows of every building on the street rattle simultaneously, and car alarms begin wailing in perfect synchronization. But it's not the physical disturbance that stops her in her tracks, it's the music. Every radio in the city suddenly broadcasts the same signal. Ethereal Void's entire catalog played at impossible speed, as if 18 years of accumulated musical energy is being compressed into minutes. The sound doesn't come from speakers, it emerges from the air itself, from metal objects, from anything capable of vibration. "Lisa!" Sarah's voice cuts through the chaos, transmitted through Lisa's car radio, her cell phone, even the metal badge on her uniform. "Rita's here. She's trying to force us back, and it's destroying everything." Lisa makes a sharp U-turn, her police cruiser's engine roaring as she races back toward the Meridian Theater. Through her windshield, she can see supernatural aurora flickering in the daytime sky above the theater district, impossible colors, dancing across buildings as reality itself becomes unstable. Her radio crackles with emergency reports from across the city. Every music venue in Portland is experiencing simultaneous supernatural manifestations. At the Crystal Ballroom, witnesses report seeing ghostly musicians from the 1940s materializing on stage. The Roseland Theater's sound system is playing songs that were never recorded, performed by bands that never existed. Downtown, the Pioneer Courthouse Square speakers are broadcasting conversations between dead composers. "All units, we have a citywide emergency," the dispatcher announces, her voice nearly drowned out by spectral harmonies bleeding through the radio system. Unknown phenomenon affecting all electronic equipment. Avoid the Meridian Theater area. Getting reports of structural instability and dangerous energy discharges. But Lisa can't avoid the theater. Dorothy Chen is still inside, and from what she's learned about Rita Castellanos' 18-year obsession, the situation is likely to get much worse before it resolves. She parks 2 blocks away and runs toward the theater, fighting against a supernatural headwind that seems to push back against anyone approaching the building. The air itself feels thick, charged with musical energy that makes her skin tingle and her teeth ache. Dorothy emerges from the theater's front entrance, supporting herself against the building's facade as waves of supernatural energy wash over her. When she sees Lisa approaching, relief floods her face. "Detective, thank God you're here." Rita Castellanos is inside with some kind of machinery. She's trying to force the children back into physical form, but it's tearing them apart. Through the theater's windows, Lisa can see strobing lights that pulse in rhythm with the citywide musical chaos. The building itself appears to be breathing, its walls expanding and contracting as supernatural forces build towards some kind of critical mass. "Mrs. Chun," I need you to get to safety. Call for backup. Tell them we need the bomb squad, paramedics, and anyone with experience in electromagnetic phenomena." Dorothy nods but hesitates before leaving. "Detective, you have to understand, if Rita succeeds in forcing them back, she won't just destroy Marcus and his friends. She unravel 50 years of supernatural musical history. Every ghost, every trapped soul, every bit of accumulated artistic energy in this building will be released at once." The implications hit Lisa like a physical blow. Portland sits on several geological fault lines, and the city's music scene has been built on top of venues with decades of emotional and supernatural resonance. If the Meridian Theater's supernatural infrastructure collapses, it could trigger a cascade effect across the entire metropolitan area. She pushes through the theater's front doors, immediately assaulted by sound and light that seems to bypass her sensory organs and attack her nervous system directly. The lobby is filled with translucent figures, musicians from across the decades, all connected to the theater's history, all being destabilized by Rita's intervention. A jazz trumpeter from the 1950s flickers in and out of visibility near the coat check. Two folk singers harmonize desperately while their forms fragment and reassemble. The spectral audience that Dorothy mentioned fills every seat, their expressions shifting between ecstasy and terror as their supernatural existence hangs in the balance. Lisa fights her way toward the stage, where the electromagnetic bombardment is most intense. The air crackles with visible energy, and she can see Rita Castellano standing in the orchestra pit, frantically adjusting controls on equipment that seems to be malfunctioning as much as functioning. "Rita," Lisa shouts over the cacophony, "you need to shut this down. You're not saving them, you're destroying them." Rita looks up, her face streaked with tears but her expression resolute. "I can't stop now. 18 years I've worked toward this moment. They're coming back, look." She points toward the stage, where the 5 members of Ethereal Void are indeed becoming more solid, but Lisa can see what Rita refuses to acknowledge. They're not being restored. They're being tortured into incomplete physical forms that can't sustain themselves. Marcus appears to be missing his left arm entirely. Jake's drumsticks pass through his translucent hands. Sarah's voice remains powerful, but her body flickers between child and adult, as if the temporal anchor is pulling her consciousness from multiple points in time. "Rita, listen to me." Sarah's amplified voice carries absolute authority. "We chose this transformation. We're not trapped, we're evolved. You're trying to force us backward to limitations we've transcended." But Rita increases the power to her equipment, and the electromagnetic pulses become visible as sheets of distorted air that slice through the supernatural manifestations. The effect is immediate and horrifying. Dozens of spectral musicians begin screaming as their energy-based existence is shredded by the uncontrolled electromagnetic bombardment. Lisa realizes she has to act decisively. She draws her service weapon, not to threaten Rita, but to target the electromagnetic generator that's causing the cascade effect. But before she can fire, Marcus's voice stops her. "Lisa, don't." His partially materialized form turns toward her, his expression urgent. "Destroying the equipment now will cause an implosion that will trap everyone, living and dead, inside the building's supernatural matrix. We'll all become part of the theater's permanent collection." The situation has moved beyond conventional solutions. Lisa needs to find a way to stop Rita's equipment without triggering a supernatural implosion, rescue Dorothy and anyone else in the building, and somehow stabilize the cascade effect that's spreading across Portland's music venues. "What do you need me to do?" she asks Marcus directly. "Get to the control board in the sound booth." Alex's voice joins the conversation, his translucent form pointing toward the balcony level. "There's a master override that can gradually power down Rita's equipment instead of cutting it off abruptly. But someone has to manually adjust each component in sequence, or the feedback will destroy the building." Lisa looks at the impossibly complex control setup Rita has established, then at the supernatural chaos consuming the theater. She's a detective, not an audio engineer or a paranormal investigator. But she's also the only person in position to prevent a supernatural disaster that could affect thousands of people. Can you guide me through it? We'll try, Sarah responds, though her voice is becoming fainter as Rita's electromagnetic bombardment intensifies. But we're losing coherence. Rita's equipment is disrupting our ability to communicate. Lisa starts climbing toward the sound booth, fighting against electromagnetic interference that makes her vision blur and her balance falter. Behind her, she can hear Rita shouting over the chaos, still convinced that she's moments away from successfully retrieving her lost clients. As Lisa reaches the balcony level, the building shudders around her, and she realizes they're running out of time. The supernatural cascade isn't just affecting Portland through her fragmenting radio connection. She can hear reports of similar phenomena in Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Rita's intervention has triggered a chain reaction that's affecting the entire West Coast's accumulated musical history. She reaches the sound booth door just as the lights throughout the theater begin strobing in a pattern that suggests the building's supernatural infrastructure is approaching total collapse. In the pit below, Rita continues her desperate work, unaware that her 18-year obsession is about to destroy the very people she's trying to save. Lisa grabs the door handle, takes a deep breath, and prepares to attempt the most complex technical procedure of her life, guided by the fragmenting voices of 5 musicians who exist somewhere between life and death, while reality itself unravels. Around them, the sound booth feels like the interior of a lightning storm. Every surface crackles with electromagnetic energy, and the control board displays readings that shouldn't be possible sound levels beyond human hearing, frequencies that exist in negative numbers, amplitude measurements that seem to bend physical laws. Lisa's hands shake as she approaches the master control panel, a maze of sliders, knobs, and digital displays that Rita has somehow integrated with her supernatural retrieval equipment. Through the booth's soundproof glass, she can see the chaos on stage intensifying, the band members' partial materializations becoming increasingly unstable as Rita pushes her equipment beyond safe parameters. Lisa, Marcus's voice comes through the booth speakers, but it's fragmented, cutting in and out like a weak radio signal. The red slider on the left that controls the electromagnetic pulse frequency. You need to reduce it gradually, no more than 5% every 30 seconds. She locates the control Marcus mentioned, noting that it's currently set at maximum. Her finger hovers over the slider as Sarah's voice joins the guidance, harmonizing with Marcus in a way that somehow makes both voices clearer. Don't just pull it down, the feedback will surge through every speaker in the city. Ease it down slowly while monitoring the amplitude display on the center console. Lisa begins the delicate process, reducing the electromagnetic frequency by tiny increments while watching for changes in the supernatural activity below. Almost immediately, the building's shuddering decreases, and some of the spectral musicians in the audience begin to stabilize. But Rita notices the change and increases power to compensate, sending the readings spiking back toward dangerous levels. She's fighting you. Jake's voice emerges from the drum monitors, his words punctuated by spectral percussion that matches his speaking rhythm. Lisa, you have to work faster than she can react, or she'll override every adjustment you make. Through the booth's glass, Lisa can see Rita frantically working at her control station in the orchestra pit, her 18 years of obsession driving her to push the equipment beyond its design limits. Sparks are beginning to fly from her electromagnetic generator, and the smell of burning electronics fills the theater. The blue knobs control harmonic resonance. Alex's voice guides her to the next set of controls. Turn them counterclockwise, but keep them balanced. If the ratios get too far off, The building's supernatural infrastructure will collapse asymmetrically. Lisa works with both hands now, making multiple adjustments simultaneously while trying to stay ahead of Rita's compensations. The technical complexity is overwhelming, but she finds herself developing an intuitive sense for the controls, as if the spectral band members are somehow sharing their musical knowledge directly with her consciousness. The Citywood Cascade effect begins to stabilize as Lisa's adjustments take hold. Through her fragmented radio connection, she hears reports that the supernatural manifestations in other venues are becoming less chaotic, more controlled. But the situation at the Meridian Theater remains critical. "Rita," Sarah's voice booms through the theater's supernatural acoustics, carrying harmonics that make the building itself seem to sing. "Look at what you're doing to us. We're not being saved, we're being destroyed." For the first time since beginning her retrieval process, Rita pauses to actually observe the results of her intervention. Marcus is only half materialized, his form flickering between solid and translucent. Jake exists as floating hands and arms, unable to maintain connection to his lower body. Danny and Alex are trapped in a feedback loop, their forms merging and separating as the temporal anchor pulls their consciousness from different points in their shared history. Horror dawns on Rita's face as she realizes that her equipment isn't restoring the band. It's torturing them into fragmented existence that satisfies neither their supernatural evolution nor their original physical forms. I can fix this," she says, but her voice lacks conviction. Dr. Voss's research said there might be initial instability. "Rita," Danny's voice carries the gentle authority that made him the band's emotional center during their physical existence. Dr. Voss never successfully retrieved anyone. Her research is based on theoretical models, not actual experience. "You're not following a proven process, you're experimenting on us." The truth hits Rita like a physical blow. She staggers backward from her control station, finally understanding that her 18-year quest has been built on hope rather than genuine knowledge. The equipment she's assembled, the thousands of dollars she's spent, the relationships she's sacrificed, all of it based on the desperate belief that her lost clients could be forcibly returned to their original existence. "But I promised," she whispers, tears streaming down her face. "I promised I'd bring you home." "You did bring us home," Sarah replies, her voice infinitely compassionate despite the torture Rita has inflicted. "This theater is our home now. We're not lost, we're transformed into something more than we ever were as physical beings." Lisa continues her work at the control board, gradually reducing the electromagnetic interference while maintaining the delicate balance needed to prevent supernatural implosion. As the energy levels decrease, the band members' partial materializations become more stable, though still incomplete. "There's one more step," Marcus tells her, his voice growing stronger. As the electromagnetic bombardment lessens, the temporal anchor needs to be disengaged completely, but it has to be done in perfect synchronization with the harmonic resonance controls, or the accumulated time distortion will snap back. Lisa studies the controls, realizing that the final adjustment requires her to manipulate 6 different settings simultaneously beyond the capability of one person. She needs help, and there's only one person in the building with the technical knowledge to assist. "Rita," she calls down to the orchestra pit, "I need your help to finish this safely." Rita looks up, confusion and shame warring in her expression. "I down single quotes T. I've made everything worse." "You have the technical skills to help fix it," Lisa insists. "Your equipment is sophisticated. You understand electromagnetic theory, harmonic mathematics, temporal mechanics. Help me undo what we've done." For a moment, Rita remains frozen in indecision. Then Alex's voice reaches her, carrying the same supportive encouragement he offered during the band's most challenging recording sessions. "Rita, you've been our manager for over 20 years, 3 as our physical manager, 18 as our spiritual guardian. You've Never stop fighting for us. Fight for us now by helping us return to the form we chose. Rita wipes her tears and approaches her control station with renewed purpose. What do you need me to do? Lisa explains the synchronized shutdown procedure, and for the first time since the crisis began, she feels hope. Working together, she and Rita begin the delicate process of disengaging the supernatural retrieval equipment without triggering the very catastrophe they're trying to prevent. As the electromagnetic pulses fade and the harmonic distortion clears, the 5 members of Ethereal Void gradually return to their chosen form, not physical, but not quite pure energy either. They exist as translucent, stable presences, clearly visible and fully coherent, able to interact with the physical world while maintaining their supernatural evolution. Thank you, Sarah says to both Lisa and Rita, her voice carrying the depth and richness that only comes from existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Both of you. Lisa for understanding what we had become. Rita for caring enough to risk everything, even when you misunderstood what we needed. The building settles around them, its supernatural infrastructure stabilized but forever changed by the night's events. Lisa realizes that she's just participated in something that will reshape her understanding of reality, consciousness, and the nature of artistic expression. But as the immediate crisis resolves, a new challenge emerges. Through the theater's windows, she can see news vans arriving, emergency response vehicles, and crowds of people drawn by the supernatural light show that's been visible across the city. The world is about to discover that Ethereal Void never really disappeared, and Lisa has to decide how much of the truth she's willing to reveal. The Meridian Theater's parking lot looks like a war zone crossed with a media circus. Emergency. Vehicles from 6 different agencies idle with their lights flashing, while news crews from every Portland station set up equipment behind hastily erected police barriers. FBI agents in dark suits confer with paranormal researchers, quantum physicists, and representatives from the Smithsonian Institution who arrived on emergency flights from Washington. D.C. Detective Lisa Wong stands at the theater's stage door, watching the chaos unfold while trying to process what she's witnessed. Behind her, Dorothy Chun sits on the theater steps, holding a cup of coffee that's gone cold as she stares at the building where her grandson exists in a form she's still learning to understand. The FBI wants to classify this as a national security incident, Chief Morrison tells Lisa, approaching with a tablet full of federal paperwork. Apparently, supernatural phenomena that affect electronic infrastructure across multiple cities qualify as potential terrorism. They want to seal the building and conduct their own investigation. Lisa turns back toward the theater's interior, where Rita continues her conversation with the band members, finally able to speak with them openly after 18 years of searching. Through the doorway, she can see the translucent figures of Ethereal Void gathered around their instruments, no longer trapped between dimensions, but not quite ready to reveal themselves to the world. Chief, they're not terrorists. They're artists who found a way to transcend physical limitations. Sealing the building would be like imprisoning them. I understand that, but we've got senators calling, the governor's office demanding explanations, and every paranormal investigator in the country driving toward Portland. This is bigger than a missing persons case now. Through the stage door, Sarah's voice carries clearly. Lisa, could you come in here? We need to discuss what happens next. Lisa excuses herself and returns to the theater's interior, where she finds an impromptu planning session in progress. Rita has shut down her equipment completely, and the supernatural energy in the building has settled into something more resembling normal acoustic properties. The band members appear stable in their translucent forms, clearly visible but obviously not entirely physical. We've been talking about exposure, Marcus explains, his bass guitar resonating with his words, even though he's not physically touching it. For 18 years we've existed in secret, But after tonight's events, that's no longer possible. Jake gestures toward the windows, where camera lenses and satellite dishes are visible through the glass. The question is whether we reveal ourselves on our own terms, or let others define what we've become. Dorothy stands up from her position near the door, her voice carrying the authority of someone who spent decades as an educator. The world deserves to know that consciousness can transcend physical death, but they also deserve to understand it correctly, not as sensationalized horror or exploitation. Sarah nods, her translucent form shimmering as she considers their options. We could demonstrate our abilities, show that we're still ourselves, still capable of creating music, just in an evolved form. But we need people who understand what we've become to help translate that for others. What about your fans? Lisa asks. Ethereal Void has a dedicated following. Some of them have probably suspected you weren't simply gone, especially after tonight's citywide manifestations. Alex brightens at the suggestion. Our music always connected with people who felt like outsiders, who understood that identity and consciousness are more fluid than most people believe. They might be more receptive to our transformation. Rita, who has been quietly listening, finally speaks up. I still have contacts in the music industry, people who trusted me when I managed the band, who might be willing to facilitate a controlled revelation rather than letting this become a media circus. Through the theater's walls, they can hear the growing crowd outside, not just officials and media, but ordinary people drawn by the supernatural light show and the rumors spreading across social media. Portland's music community is well represented, with musicians, venue owners, and longtime Ethereal Void fans gathering despite the police barriers. There's something else to consider, Danny says, his voice harmonizing with the building's natural acoustics. We're not the only supernatural entities here. This building has been a gateway for decades, accumulating the spirits of musicians who died with unfinished business. If we reveal ourselves, we're also exposing them. Lisa hadn't considered this aspect. How many others are we talking about? Dozens, Sarah replies. Musicians from across the past century who found their way here after death, drawn by the building's unique acoustic properties. Most of them are harmless artists who simply wanted to continue creating music. But some are more volatile, trapped by trauma or unresolved conflicts. The complexity of the situation deepens as Lisa realizes they're not just deciding the fate of Ethereal Void, but potentially dozens of supernatural entities whose existence has been hidden for decades. A knock at the stage door interrupts their discussion. Officer Martinez enters, his expression grim with responsibility. Detective, I've got Mayor Patterson outside, along with representatives from the FBI, the Department of Energy, and something called the Paranormal Research Division. They want to speak with whoever's in charge of the situation. Lisa exchanges glances with Rita and Dorothy, realizing that the decision about revelation may be taken out of their hands. If federal agencies get involved, the band members could find themselves classified as either dangerous anomalies to be contained or strategic resources to be exploited. Give us 5 minutes, she tells Martinez. As the officer leaves, the band members confer among themselves in harmonies that exist below the threshold of normal human hearing. When they finish, Sarah speaks for the group. We've decided to reveal ourselves publicly, but on our own terms. We'll give one interview to a journalist we trust, and one live performance to demonstrate that we're still the same artists our fans remember. After that, we'll decide how much interaction we want with the outside world. Who's the journalist? Rita asks. David Chun, Marcus replies, and Dorothy gasps with recognition. My nephew, Marcus's cousin. He works for Rolling Stone now, covers supernatural phenomena in music. He's been investigating our disappearance for years, but respectfully never exploiting the family's pain for sensational stories. The symmetry feels appropriate. David Chun has been approaching the mystery from the outside, while Dorothy approached it from within. And now they'll collaborate to tell the story accurately. What about the performance? Lisa asks. Jake's translucent form moves behind his drum kit, his spectral hands producing sounds that somehow feel more real than physical percussion. Here, obviously, this is our home now. But we'll need to control. Access carefully. Too many people might destabilize the building's supernatural infrastructure. Sarah adds, we're thinking 50 people maximum. Family members, longtime fans, music industry representatives who knew us before the transformation. People who can witness what we've become and help others understand that it's evolution, not tragedy. The plan takes shape quickly. David Chun will arrive within hours for an exclusive interview. The performance will happen the following evening, with carefully selected attendees who can serve as credible witnesses to their continued existence and artistic evolution. But as they finalize the details, Lisa notices that the supernatural energy in the building is changing again. Not the chaotic disruption from Rita's equipment, but something more subtle, as if other entities are responding to the decision to reveal the theater's secrets. Is it just me, she asks, or is the building feeling different again? Danny's expression grows serious as he attunes himself to the supernatural currents flowing through the theater. The others are awakening. All the musicians who've been dormant here for decades, they're becoming active in response to our decision to go public. Through the theater's acoustic system, they begin to hear other voices, dozens of them, representing musical styles from across the past century. Jazz singers from the 1940s, folk artists from the 1960s, punk rockers from the 1980s, all of them connected to the building's history, all of them now stirring to consciousness. Sarah's voice carries a note of concern as she realizes the implications. We're not just revealing ourselves tomorrow night. We're potentially awakening every supernatural musician who's ever found refuge in this building. Lisa looks around the theater, understanding that their revelation may trigger the largest supernatural event in recorded history, and she's the detective who will be responsible for managing the consequences. 24 hours later, the Meridian Theater hums with controlled anticipation. 50 carefully selected guests occupy the venue's restored seats, family members who never stopped believing, music journalists known for their integrity, long time, fans whose dedication transcended normal fandom, and industry professionals who remember Ethereal Void's original promise. Detective Lisa Huang sits in the front row beside Dorothy Chun, both women forever changed by their role in the band's revelation. David Chun's interview, published online 6 hours ago, has already garnered 2 million views and sparked conversations across social media platforms about the nature of consciousness, artistic transcendence, and what it means to be truly alive. Rita Castellano stands at the soundboard she once used to torture the band back toward physical existence, now repurposed to amplify their chosen supernatural form. Her 18-year obsession has transformed into something healthier, not the desperate need to retrieve the past, but the mature desire to support their continued evolution. On stage, Ethereal Void takes their positions with the same pre-performance ritual they used 2 decades ago, but now their movements carry a fluidity that transcends physical limitations. Sarah approaches the microphone with translucent grace, her form shimmering between dimensions as she prepares to demonstrate that death is not the end of artistic expression. Before we begin, Sarah addresses the audience, her voice carrying perfectly without electronic amplification. We want you to understand what you're about to witness. We didn't disappear 18 years ago, we evolved. We chose transformation over traditional mortality, and tonight we're sharing that choice with people who matter to us. Marcus's bass begins the opening notes of Midnight Confession, but the song sounds different now, richer, more complex, as if the music exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The other instruments join gradually, creating harmonies that shouldn't be possible with their original equipment, but somehow emerge naturally from their supernatural existence. As the performance builds, the audience realizes they're witnessing something unprecedented in human history. Artists who have transcended death while retaining their creative identity, their personal relationships, and their ability to connect with living audiences. But 20 minutes into the set, the evening takes an unexpected turn. Other voices begin harmonizing with Sarah's lead vocals, dozens of them, representing musical styles from across the past century. The dormant supernatural entities that Danny warned about are awakening, drawn by the energy of live performance and the decision to end decades of secrecy. Instead of chaos, however, the additional voices create something magnificent. Jazz harmonies from the 1940s weave through ethereal voids alternative rock structure. Folk melodies from the 1960s provide counterpoint to Jake's percussion. Classical arrangements emerge from punk rock foundations, all of it somehow cohesive despite the impossibility of such musical fusion. Lisa watches in amazement as translucent figures begin appearing throughout the theater, not just on stage, but in the aisles, the balcony, even floating above the audience. Dozens of musicians who found refuge in the Meridian Theater over the decades, all of them now participating in a supernatural symphony that transcends individual artistic identity. Dorothy grips Lisa's arm, tears streaming down her face as she recognizes her grandson not just as Marcus Chun, member of Ethereal Void, but as part of something larger, a community of artists who chose evolution over extinction, collaboration over individual glory. The performance reaches its climax with echoes of tomorrow, but now. The song incorporates musical elements from a dozen different eras. Sarah's voice soars above instrumental arrangements that span centuries of musical development, all of it unified by the theater's supernatural acoustics and the artist's shared commitment to transcendent creativity. As the final notes fade, the audience sits in stunned silence before erupting into applause that seems to shake the building's foundations. But the supernatural musicians don't take traditional bows instead. They gradually fade back to their chosen level of visibility, maintaining their presence, but returning to the subtle existence they prefer. Questions? Sarah asks, her voice carrying gentle humor. A longtime fan in the third row raises her hand tentatively. Are you happy in this form? Jake answers, his translucent form moving behind the drum kit with obvious joy. We're more than happy, we're complete. We have unlimited time to explore musical possibilities, perfect communication with each other, and the ability to collaborate with artists from across history. This isn't a consolation prize for death. It's an upgrade to existence. David Chun stands up from his position in the press section. What does this mean for other musicians? Is transformation available to everyone? Alex fields this question, his guitar harmonizing with his words. It's not automatic, and it's not for everyone. It requires genuine artistic passion, willingness to transcend individual ego, and the ability to maintain identity while becoming part of something larger. Most musicians are perfectly fulfilled by traditional mortality. A music industry executive raises her hand. Will you record new music? Tour in this form? Sarah considers this carefully. We'll continue creating, absolutely. But our music exists in dimensions that physical recording equipment can't fully capture. Tonight's performance is being recorded, but listeners will only hear a fraction of what's actually happening. Rita approaches the microphone, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. If I may add something, for 18 years, I believed I was searching for 5 missing people. Tonight, I understand that I was actually privileged to witness 5 artists choose evolution over limitation. They weren't lost, they were transformed into something more beautiful than I had the vision to imagine. As the formal Q&A concludes, The audience begins mingling with the supernatural musicians in a way that feels remarkably natural. Conversations flow easily between the living and the transcended, with family members finally able to process their grief into something more complex and healing. Lisa finds herself in conversation with several of the awakened, supernatural entities, musicians from across the decades, who share stories of their own transformations, their reasons for choosing this existence, their perspectives on art that transcends physical mortality. Detective Marcus approaches her, his bass guitar resonating with gratitude. "Thank you for understanding what we had become instead of trying to force us back into what we used to be. Thank you for showing me that consciousness is more flexible than I ever imagined," Lisa replies. "This experience has changed how I think about missing persons cases, about death investigations, about the nature of identity itself." As the evening winds down, the 50 witnesses begin leaving with stories that will reshape public understanding of supernatural phenomena, artistic transcendence, and the possibilities that exist beyond traditional mortality. But they also leave with a sense of responsibility to help the world understand that what they've witnessed represents evolution, not tragedy. Dorothy remains behind, settling into a front-row seat for what has become her regular evening visit with her grandson. The conversation they share now is richer than any they had during his physical existence, encompassing not just family news but philosophical discussions about consciousness, creativity, and the nature of love that transcends physical form. Rita locks up her equipment, but instead of leaving, she takes a position in the theater's management office that she's maintained informally for 18 years. Her role has evolved from desperate searcher to protective guardian, helping manage the interface between the supernatural community and the outside world. Lisa remains until nearly midnight, fascinated by the dynamics between the various supernatural entities and their approach to collaborative existence. When she finally leaves, she carries with her a fundamentally altered understanding of reality and a new appreciation for the mysteries that still exist beyond the reach of conventional investigation. 3 months later, the Meridian Theater has become a pilgrimage site for musicians, paranormal researchers, and anyone interested in the boundaries between life and death. Monthly concerts featuring the supernatural musical community have sold out for the next 2 years, with proceeds supporting music education programs and research into consciousness studies. Ethereal Void's first post-transformation album, recorded using experimental techniques that capture multiple dimensional layers, has topped charts in categories that didn't exist before their revelation. More importantly, their example has inspired conversations about artistic legacy, the nature of creative fulfillment, and the possibilities that might exist beyond traditional mortality. Detective Lisa Huang has been promoted to head a new paranormal investigation division, applying the lessons learned from the Ethereal Void case to other mysteries involving supernatural phenomena. Her methods emphasize understanding and communication over containment and control, recognizing that not all unexplained occurrences represent threats to be eliminated. And in the Meridian Theater, the music continues. Every night at 3:17 a.m., when the boundary between dimensions is thinnest, Ethereal Void and their supernatural collaborators create compositions that exist simultaneously in past, present, and future music that reminds anyone willing to listen that consciousness, creativity, and love are more powerful than death, more enduring than physical form, and more beautiful than anything limited by traditional existence could ever hope to become. The instruments tune themselves not because they're haunted, but because they're inhabited by artists who chose transcendence over termination, evolution over extinction, and eternal creativity over the temporary limitations of mortal form. In the end, it was never about disappearance at all. It was about transformation and the courage to embrace possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. The music plays on,